Hello everyone and welcome to this event, the launch of the extraordinary novel that is Shocked Earth by Saskia Goldschmidt. My name is Helen Sedgwick. I'm going to be chairing the event for you this evening, and it's a real honor for me to be joined today by Saskia Goldschmidt, the author, and Antoinette Fawcett, the translator of this novel. There's going to be some readings from both Saskia and Antoinette, as well as some questions from myself during the course of this evening. But to begin with, I would like to tell you a little bit about each of our speakers, starting with Saskia Goldschmidt. Having worked as a drama and acting teacher for more than 30 years, Saskia Goldschmidt debuted as a writer with her family portrait, Mandatory Happiness, that is based on her research into her father's experience as a concentration camp survivor. After that, she just hasn't stopped writing. Her novel, The Hormone Factory, was longlisted for the Libris Literature Prize and was followed by The Vintage Queen. Her books have been published around the world and translated into numerous different languages. Her latest project was the republishing of Diary of Bergen-Belsen, which was written by Renate Lecker, the first wife of Saskia's father. Saskia lives in Amsterdam with her husband. She has a daughter and a son, 2 daughters-in-law, and fairly recently, the most beautiful grandchild in the world. And Antoinette Fawcett, hello Antoinette, is a literary translator from Dutch to English with a PhD in literary translation from the University of East Anglia. Her interest in Dutch literature and language goes back to her earliest years. She is the daughter of a Dutch mother and an English father, and has spent time living and working in the Netherlands. Antoinette has translated for Dutch and British publishers, as well as for the British Film Institute, the Dutch Foundation for Literature, and the Holland Festival. Her translation of Bird's Cottage, a novel by Eva Meyer, was shortlisted for the 2019 Vondel Prize. Before becoming a translator, she taught English language and literature, world literature and drama for many years, and has worked in China, Singapore, and Norway. So welcome Saskia, welcome Antoinette. Thank you both very much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you here. So I can think of no better way to start the event than with a reading from the book itself. So Saskia, if you are ready and willing, would you like to introduce us to this novel?
I would love to. I start at the beginning. I think that's it's nearly the beginning. It's not, this is the book. On the second Saturday of the year 1993, Ootje Rosa Corridon announced that a certain farmer and his wife would be coming to tea on Sunday afternoon and that her daughter was expected to be there. Trein asked her mother what those people were coming for. Ootje didn't look up from the ironing board, where she was ironing starch into her snow-white tablecloth, but she repeated sternly that they were counting on Trein to be there and told her to dress nicely. In the evening, while Ootje was sweeping, mopping and polishing the parlor, Trein asked her father Zwier what was behind this visit. He tapped out a slow rhythm on the floor with his slippered foot and gazed at the flames flickering behind the blackened mica window of the stove. Better not be too rebellious about it, he said softly, as if his words might pass through the thick walls of the farmhouse. She's doing her best. Her best for what? Trein continued, whispering. What have those old bots got to do with me? Then he stopped tapping his foot and said it wasn't only the farmer and his wife who would be visiting. Their second son would come along too. But that's something you don't know. She means well. He picked up a log, opened the door of the stove, and carefully placed it on the fire. I can continue a little bit more. Is it okay? Yeah?
Please do, yes.
Okay. Trein was in the farmyard, watching a faded Volkswagen pickup truck bump slowly up the Lanning, then come to a standstill right in front of her. The truck's small cab had hardly enough space for the hefty people who bulged out of it as the door opened. A square-set old farmer, a farmer's wife clothed all in black lace, checking Trein out from top to toe, and a big-boned young man who thrust his left hand out at her. His right hand was little more than a mutilated claw. Inside the farm, around the parlor table, the old bots, teacups in hand, floundered through a conversation about the first-rate location of this farmstead, surrounded by its own land, about the tornado that had struck one of the islands, and about the plane crash in Faro a month earlier, which had killed someone from the village. Trein paid no attention to the son. He was at least 25, a man who had lost his youth, but not his acne. He kept his lump of a hand on his thighs and listened to the conversation of the old folks, casting an odd glance or two at Trein. She kept her mouth shut and stared at the patterns in the carpet. Her mother ordered her to come to the kitchen with her to fetch the nibbles and then hissed at her to make more of an effort. The lad was shy, right enough, but plenty of people had told her he was a very decent fella. When everyone was sitting down again, and Trein was going round with the bowl of peanuts, and the lad reached out his good hand to grab a fistful, Trein was struck by the thought that peanuts gave you spots, as she once read somewhere. Because of the sudden silence and the dismayed faces staring at her, she realized that it wasn't a thought, but that she must have said it loud and clear. The visit was soon over. Trein realized that in her mother's eyes, she'd never be able to do anything right unless she got herself married to a farmer's unprepossessing son. Perhaps it would be better for her to leave the unspoken reproaches, to leave this boundless landscape and the mist that lingered above the ditches for much too long in the mornings. And so she left in the early hours of one Sunday morning, taking only her old school backpack with her, stuffed with a few dresses, her much too high stilettos, her makeup bag, her Walkman, the family photo with Jort in it, and Zwier's ancient silver petrol lighter, which she nicked from his tobacco pouch on the table, in which she had left a note for him saying sorry twice. Once because she was leaving, and once for taking his cigarette lighter with her.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I think following on from that reading, for me, the family relationships within the book were kind of the core, the heart of the story for me. Yeah. It's about mother-daughter relationships. It's about intergenerational relationships. Yeah. And they're kind of the weight of expectation, the obligation that can be passed down generations within a family. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the various family relationships in the book and why you wanted to write about them?
Yeah, it started with I always start out to write out of curiosity because I want to do some research, because I think, how do people cope with this or that, or what has happened here or there? And since I was when I heard about the fact that in this rural area in Groningen, it's in the north of the Netherlands, it's and it's lots of farmers living there. And when I heard that if a child wants to take over the farm of the family, then it's normal, of course, that he is staying in the house, or she, and works together with the parents in the farm. And since I'm a mother myself, and I raised two children, and I love them dearly, but I know that there is a certain age, 18, 19, 20, and then you think, would be good if they are going to live their own lives, to making their own thoughts, and I don't have to see it all, and they don't feel I see it, and all this complicated stuff between parents and children. And then I was really curious about, but how are they doing that? If they work the whole day in the same area, and also they, and then in the evening they sit on the same couch watching the telly shows or whatever. I was really curious about how do they manage, and do they manage? So that was for me the start of the whole book. It was the curiosity about the parents. And since I'm a mother myself and a daughter, and I think, and maybe also because I did write a lot about father and daughter already, I think I was really interested in about how is this between mothers and daughters.
Mm-hmm.
But the other person, which is very important in the book, who is very important in the book, that's Zwier.
Yeah.
And he is the grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can I perhaps jump in at that point?
Please.
Because I agree entirely with both of you that the family is at the heart of the book, of course, it's about them. And I really felt that, well, you're very good at bringing the characters to life, and that's a bonus for the translator, because you can feel in front of you the characters behaving as they would do in reality. And I felt that in the passage that you'd read to us, that, as you say, the relationship between the daughter and the mother is very important, between Klein and Otje, but the warm relationship is with the father.
Yeah.
And the section where they're sitting in front of the stove, I think, really, yeah, that really emphasizes that. So Zwier and Klein are sitting in front of the stove, talking about some kind of secret, and it turns out that Otje has invited a farming family for a marriage bargaining in a very old-fashioned way. And Zwier is really embarrassed about this, and I think you really capture that he doesn't want to have an argument with his wife about it, but he's also embarrassed that they're doing this to the daughter. And something I thought that you bring in the reality of the characters through their actions, and I really wanted to bring that across as the translator. And one sentence I think really shows that, where the rhythm and the sound really bring that to life for me. So the bit that you've already read, he tapped out a slow rhythm on the floor with his slippered foot and gazed at the flames flickering behind the blackened mica window of the stove. And I love translating that sort of thing, where the sound of the original language helps you to create a really nice sound in the English. And as I said, it brings, for me, right from the beginning of the story, it brought Zwier alive through his actions.
Yeah. Well, but it's always, well, of course, the dialogue between characters is very important, but it's only one part of the thing. Mm-hmm. And the whole the rhythm in the story, but also the actions of what people do. I mean, what I always try to do is to image the whole image. I make a scene of it.
Yeah.
And I imagine how he sits there near the fire, and exactly as you described it very well. It is a little bit ashamed, and so I see it, and then I describe what I see, and that's not only the words, but it's also how he sits there and what he's doing to hide his shame, or his shame. It's a big word, but embarrassment. Yeah. That's exactly.
Yeah, he's looking at the stove instead of his daughter, and the stove is so symbolic in the story as a whole, I think. It's the heart of the home.
Yeah. It used to be part of the home, till it can't exist anymore, but that's later on. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to talk about the sort of landscape as well, almost as one of the characters in the book. Family is one heart, the other heart is the place, the incredible place, the landscape where you've set the story. And I'd love to know what the landscape means to you, and the community as well, the landscape and the people living within it, and how you know them so well, and how you wrote about that place so authentically. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's the landscape I write about, and where the whole story is situated is at Het Hoge Land. It's called the Hailan Land. and it's situated in the northeast of the Netherlands. It's between the city of Groningen and the sea, and it is very open land. It is very flat and open, and it's there's a lot of sky. There's more. If you can look for kilometers, and you see a lot of land, a lot of sky, a lot of clay. It's harsh land, and I come there since 40 years. I have friends living there, and I'd love to come there. And I once found a quote. I don't know if I can find it so quickly, of John Coetzee. He said something very nice about it, but now, and I wrote it down with my help of my beautiful translator. Yeah, John Coetzee, he once wrote, "I really do believe that people can fall in love only with one landscape during their lifetimes. One can appreciate lots of geographies and enjoying them, but there is only one that one feels to your bones." And for me, that's het Hoge Land. So when I started writing about 12 years ago, when my friends left for holidays, I went to work there. I took care of their house and their garden, and then I started to work there. And then I started to talk with people in the surroundings, and then I heard the stories about parents and children living together, and this was very close together in a way that made me quite nervous. And I liked the contrast between this intimacy of the families and the spaciousness of the landscape. And I thought it's a beautiful contrast to work with. So then I thought, well, if I'm going to write about this, I do have, I always do a lot of research when I start with a book. I start like a journalist, doing a lot of research, talking to people, reading books, going in archives, well, very intensely. But this time I thought, if I write about a farmer family, and if I write about what this countryside means for a family, I have to know for myself what it means to me. And I have to know it and recognize it in the different seasons. It's not enough to be some nice summer months here, 1 month in the summer, and walking through the daffodils and da, 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 da. I mean, I have to be there in harsh winter when the wind is very hard, when it's very cold, when it's rough weather. I want to live it all before I'm going to write about it. So then I looked for if I could rent a little place, and I was immensely lucky because I found a little beautiful house on the courtyard of a former farm in the middle of nowhere. My first neighbors are 600 meters far away. And this house, I have a working space there. And if I sit up behind my desk, I see the countryside for 5 kilometers. And so I've started to rent it for a year. And then I started every day with walking or cycling through the country. And after that year, when I had really lived all these seasons, I thought, I don't want to leave again. So I still rent it, and it's now my writer's home.
Oh.
So I'm very lucky to live both in Amsterdam and in the Middlestem.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's very nice. Yeah.
And Antoinette, as the translator, do you know the area? Certainly from reading the English translation, it seems like the area has a very personal connection for you as well, Antoinette.
To an extent, yes. So when I was living in the Netherlands as a teacher in the late 1980s, early 1990s, I lived also in the east of the Netherlands, so away from what people think of as being Holland, so on the Dutch-German border. And it's actually borders on Groningen province, and we quite often used to travel up there for day trips or to visit students who'd gone to university at the University of Groningen. And I also know Friesland, which is a landscape that's not so very dissimilar to the Groningen Land. So the sea, the area with the dikes up in the north, yes, I know it, but I wouldn't say I know it as intimately as Saskia knows it. I agree with Saskia that you need to do proper research, also as a translator. And with other books that I've translated, I've tried to go to the landscape. In this case, I was able to kind of recollect the landscape rather than going to it. Unfortunately, the pandemic eventually got in the way as well. First of all, there were time constraints, and then secondly, there was the pandemic that made it hard. But I have friends who live in the area, or who lived in the area, so I could check things with them. And in this day and age, we've also got Google Maps, and you can zoom right down to the level of the farm, the church, the village, to really see what's going on in the landscape. So, yeah, a degree of familiarity, not absolute familiarity. And then the other thing is, although we don't think of there as being a relationship between the Northern English landscape and the Northern Dutch colonial landscape, we do have reed beds, we have wetlands, we have areas which bear some similarity to what Saskia is describing. And I have a great love for nature as well. So that comes into the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And as well as being an incredibly beautiful landscape, very vividly described, it's also a landscape that has been damaged. Quite severely damaged by gas extraction.
Sorry, I want to say one thing about this incredible, beautiful landscape, because that's what I find. I love it there, but there are also a lot of people who hate it there. I mean, it's not. There are also people who they find it horrible, because it's so flat, and so it's not for everyone. Very beautiful.
It sounds incredible. I would love to go there. Just from reading your book, I'm desperate to go there.
You're welcome. Okay, sorry for interrupting.
But yeah, it's a landscape that has been very damaged by the process of gas extraction, which is a very important theme in the book. Could you talk to us a little bit about that and why it's so important for people to hear about it?
Well, because this gas extraction has immense consequences. It started in the early 60s. There was in this landscape, there was found at that time the biggest gas field of the world. So everyone was really excited, especially the big gas and oil companies and the government, because wow, this was the big thing. There was money to be made. That was very, very clear from the beginning. So they started to do gas extraction, and although there were not very many, but there were some people, engineers, who warned them, and they said, "You can't do this like that. I mean, this is going to ruin things, and we don't know exactly. It could cause earthquakes. It could there could be other disasters. The ground can lower, whatever. You can't do it like that." And these few people were put aside as madmen and like enemies of progress. Well, in the beginning of the 60s, progress was like God. I mean, that nobody would want to hear that he was old-fashioned and whatever. So they were put aside. And then from the 19th on, the earth started to move. But the people who noticed, also the people just sitting in their farmhouses or in their houses. Groningen is not only farms, there are also villages and cities, one city. And they felt some trembling or whatever. They were also, nobody believed them. And although there has been done some research by Shell and ExxonMobil, and that's only coming out lately, that then there was, the conclusion was that there was, it caused, earthquakes could be caused by it. And they put it in a drawer very far away and they didn't do anything with it. And Then was 2012, and there was a big earthquake, the biggest one till then. And then no one could say anymore, this doesn't do anything. I mean, maybe I should talk a little bit about what a big earthquake was 3.6. Now, most people think 3.6, there's nothing in Italy or in Naples, you have 8.9 or whatever, because that's the scale of Richter that says something about the force of the quake. But what it doesn't say is that these earthquakes are not like the natural earthquakes in mountain areas. It's not like it's a quake deep in the ground and in rock. No, the soil of the north of the Netherlands, it's sand and clay. So it's glibbery, it's like a pudding. And the quakes occur on less than 3 kilometers. So the impact is much larger than, but they have been making for a long time, they try to minimize it. Oh, it's all not that important. And the year after this earthquake, when everyone had to say, okay, these earthquakes are related to the gas winning, we can't deny it anymore. Then, with permission of the government, long live the liberal government, they mounted the amount of gas winning, they let it grow. So even more gas was taken out of the ground. And the big problem is that then the whole process started of people were sewing their houses being damaged, the more and the more and the more, because the earthquakes became also more frequent. And what has been since then, and it's still not resolved, the companies try to take as less responsibility as they can. The government tries also, they say they want to compensate everybody, but they make such big bureaucratic mountains for everyone that it's quite desperate to get anything done. So people live for years in houses that are more and more destroyed. So that's a theme that I couldn't deny in my book, and it became also my question: how are you dealing with that? A farm that has been for your farm, your family's farm for generations. What does it do with you if you see that, and what can you do? Well, that became, of course, a theme of the book. Yeah,
a very powerful one.
Yeah.
And it's interesting what Antoinette was saying about there being certain parallels with the north of England.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people in England will be, in a way, familiar with what you're saying from the fracking that has happened in the north of England.
Yeah.
So this gas extraction was slightly different from fracking, I think. I don't know if you could say a little bit about that.
Yeah, what I understood is that fracking, what they do is because fracking, what's the case in your country is that it's the gas or the oil, which is hidden in a layer of rock. So they need, what they put in is sand and water and chemicals under pressure to break open the rock. And if the rock that's breaking open, then the gas goes up. In the gas extraction in the Netherlands, because the soil is much softer, they just make a well and the gas comes out. But in fracking means also chemicals are put into the ground. So, what they do both is they get something what has been for a million years into the ground, they get it out, and it makes, of course, it does something. It's the most logical thing. If you have layers of different ground and you get a layer out, something is going to happen. That's not too difficult to think about.
Yeah.
I think.
It's horrendous, the fact that it's being done, not just there, but all over the world. These techniques and similar techniques are causing this devastation. Antoinette, did you know much about gas extraction, or did you have to do a lot of research to translate
it? Yes and no. So in order to keep my Dutch up, I haven't been living in the Netherlands for a really long time. I try and watch the Dutch news every night. You can do that on the internet. And of course, as Saskia said, from 2012 onwards, the government couldn't deny that there were earthquakes happening there. And there were more and more protests from the people in the province, and it became more and more a subject of news. So it was in the back of my mind that this problem was happening there. But when I started translating the book, yes, I did have to do a lot of reading, a lot of articles about it, both in Dutch and English, to make sure that I really understood the history and development of the gas field, and also the geology, the geomorphology of the area, so that I could use the correct words to describe the kind of clay that is the problem there, the old marine clay and so forth. So it required really quite a lot of thinking about the right way of translating it. And I have to say, Saskia has her sources on her own website, which is helpful. I found my own sources too, but Saskia helps those interested to find out more. And one of the things that's mentioned in the novel is animation that one of the characters, Femke, shows her mother. And that alerts them to how the earthquakes have developed over time. And that animation is visible also to English viewers, so that it sort of emphasizes the reality of it. It's not an invented problem, it's a true problem.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. I'm going to tell the guy, Cor Dwarshuis is his name. He is living there, and he is an activist, and he made this animation. And I think it's very clear. It makes very clear what's happening.
Yes.
And I think he will love it, that now in England.
Yes. I mean, in fact, Saskia, you could put the English links on your own website so that English readers could follow up on that if they wanted to. We could perhaps discuss that later.
It might be possible to put the links over this video as we're speaking. Broadcast. So fingers crossed. Links will be available.
The other thing I had to research, which was less difficult in some ways, but the difference between the Richter and the Mercalli scales that you mentioned earlier, and the way that the Mercalli scale is described in English. So there's a sort of little parallel story in the novel about the volcanologist and seismologist Mercalli, who is an Italian priest who was absolutely obsessed with discovering what was happening in the earth. And I really liked the story and the way that it helped you to zoom away from what was happening in Groningen and make people realise that this isn't just a provincial problem in a little part of the Netherlands, but it's something that affects the whole world. So I thought that was a very good part of the structure of the novel.
Yeah, well, it's also when I discovered the Mercalli scale, I had never heard from him before. And the good thing is that where Richter only measures the force of the earthquake, he is measuring the way the earthquake has effect on the ground, on the buildings, on the animals, and on the people. And that's where it's about, of course.
Yes.
But Mercalli in his time, in the beginning of the 20th century, in fact, it happened the same with his discoveries as happens now with the people in Groningen who are trying to get their to get out of this horrible situation that their houses are crumbling. He was not. Everything he discovered, he showed to the government, Italian government, from do something for the people. He could predict an earthquake. He could predict the force of an earthquake. He only didn't know when. Something like that it was. And nothing was done with his discoveries because, well, it's not economical interesting.
Yes.
That's the only reason. So nothing changed. It's exactly the same now. both in things like this happen in Texas, in the USA. It happens in Scotland. It happens. It's all the same.
Yes. Yeah.
Profit runs, not humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question for Antoinette, and I think, Antoinette, you might have a reading for us as well.
Yes.
So as well as there being this very technical aspect to the book about the gas extraction, the earthquakes, and a very political strand to the novel, there's also a lot of poetry in the novel. I found the language itself utterly beautiful. And I was wondering if you'd like to talk about the process of translating that, and perhaps read an extract that you're particularly fond of, if you would be happy to.
Yes, yeah. In fact, I've got two extracts. One is an actual poem, and one is a little prose passage. So when I read a book, whether it's in English or Dutch, I'm very aware of the language that's used. I write poetry myself. I translate poetry. And in fact, probably, I have to say, poetry was my first love until I really started working with the translation of novels. I had fallen in love with the translation of poetry. But what strikes me about Saskia's novel is how naturally she integrates the lyrical passages into the story as a whole. The lyricism isn't an add-on, it's not decorative, it's part of the characterization of the people and of the landscape itself. As you said, the landscape's like a kind of character in the story. So, and the story also follows the rhythms of the year. And because it follows the rhythms of the year, there's always something new to discover in that landscape. And one character in particular, a daughter, Femke, who we haven't yet come across, is absolutely in love with the nature, and she follows what's happening in particular with the bird life. I've already said about Saskia's really beautiful sentences and the rhythms, but one lyrical prose passage that really struck me is when Femke is recalling being a little girl and being taught by her grandfather, Sweer, how to appreciate nature. And it's on page 117. I'll just read out that little section. It's just a little prose passage. He'd stop her abruptly and point to a bird in the air, or to a fox with a crow in its jaws, slinking out of the maize field. She loved sitting with him at the edge of the pool in silence, ears pricked, and then spotting a reed warbler, a bearded tit, or a blue throat on a reed stem, a gadwall, a widgeon, or a merganser on the pool, or dragonflies with their paper-thin, transparent wings and colourful little bodies, skillful, graceful little flying machines, zooming right above the water without her ears being able to hear that zooming. And yet they did make a zooming sound because, as Sweer said, we can't always see or hear everything that's there. Now, what I really liked about that was that it's Femke as a young woman recalling Femke as a child and how she responded to her grandfather. And you asked me what it's like to translate it. Well, in that case, I absolutely followed the Dutch. So, there are lots of birds mentioned in it, and of course you have to know the names of the birds and you translate them. But I also followed stylistic aspects like the repetition of the word zooming right above the water without her ears being able to hear that zooming, and yet they did make a zooming sound. And I thought it was really important. Sometimes people say you should vary words, and I think in this case it's really important not to vary the words, because it sort of builds up this sense of the dragonflies making that noise that she can't actually hear.
Can I say something about it? Because I of course, I'm lucky I also can read the English, and my books are translated in different languages and I can't read them all. But what I was really very, very surprised about the way that you, Antoinette, have been translating the book, because I recognized really the rhythm, and that's something that's often in other languages it's gone, or you don't have, and the way you have been translating it is really not just only translating the soul of the book. You really have done a very good job in that. I'm very happy with this translation.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, there was also something that I thought I would read you, which is an actual poem, which again relates to the character of Femke, who is the daughter of the lady that we met at the start of the reading that Saskia gave. So Tijn's daughter, later on, about 20 years later, roughly. And she writes a poem. She's not a writer. She's somebody who's quite quiet, and she doesn't use language a lot, but she writes a poem after the death of her grandfather, which comes straight from her heart. And that's something that I thought would be interesting to read to you, and also perhaps to spend a moment discussing. So, if I could make the reed beds blossom and turn the cloudy skies to bright, if I could change the rain to sunshine and make the sun's fire burn at night, if I could make the stiff clay crumble and make volcanoes laugh in joy, if I could set the swallows dancing, I'd hold you tight, you wouldn't die. You taught me how to see in darkness and helped me hear how silence sounds. You showed me how to read the skyscapes, and when the wind sings rainy songs. Because of you, I love the fire that crackles in the stove at home. Because of all the tales you told me, I love the creatures on our land. Because of you, I grew to realize that love and care go hand in hand. I would have liked to walk beside you for far more years than I can count. If everything could only be safe and certain once again, I promise you that we'll look after the farm you've left us to defend. I promise you that your life's ending will never be Scotland's end. So, that was the little poem. I think for me, what was very moving about it is, as I said, it comes straight from the heart. It's not a professional poem, and I didn't want to translate it in a over-polished fashion. So, you know, the rhymes aren't perfect, but then they're not perfect in the Dutch either. And I took a few little liberties with it, but not great liberties. I think Saskia would agree. You know, the liberties for trying to get the rhyme and the rhythm in it are minimal, really. I increased the number of lines in the poem. In the Dutch, the last lines of the poem are longer. And because I was, the rhythm overcame me, I think, and it just made its own shape in English. And I felt, instead of fighting against the shape that it was making in English, I would let it be, because it's meant to be something fairly spontaneous. Yeah.
No, I'm very glad that your translation is not that literary, but translating the soul and the idea of that's what you have done through the whole book, and I'm very, very happy with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I could ask, kind of following on from that, I found it really fascinating, Antoinette, the way you'd try to capture the accent, or what I imagine as the accent in the original Dutch. So obviously this is a very specific landscape, it's a real landscape, the people talk a certain way. There's an accent, there's a turn of phrase, there's a whole character to their dialogue. So how, I suppose it's a question for both of you. Saskia, how do you capture that in the first place? And Antoinette, how do you transpose that to a different language whilst retaining the authenticity of it.
Yes.
Well, Groningen has a real dialect, and I can't speak it, and I can understand it a little bit. But for people from Groningen, you're not part of you're not one of the guys if you don't speak it, like it's in very often, and they're right. So I was very certain I didn't want to write a novel in this dialect, because I didn't want to write a novel for, even if I could have done it, for a very small amount of people. I want to write a novel that can be read by a lot of the more people, the better. So, but because I have been trying to catch the character of the language, and the character of the way people talk, and also the way people don't talk. I mean, Groningen people are famous for their not talking. The Groningen people are known as people who say very little and are not really enthusiastic, and people, if they are very enthusiastic, they would say it could be less. I mean, that's the kind of way they are really, they think it's fine. That's the kind of language that's being used. So, but I've been listening a lot and talking a lot with people. And an example of how I find the words is when I was cycling one morning early, and it was a beautiful spring morning, and I was sitting somewhere for a while, and then a farmer came along, and I talked with him. We sat talking what he was doing and how the beets were growing and whatever. And then he, all the time, I was writing already. I had my characters, and then all the time he said, "Write enough, write enough." Every sentence, 1, 2, 3, write enough, write enough. And then that's for Zwier.
Yeah.
What I need for him. Sometimes you find your text literally on the streets, or in the meadow.
Yes.
Yeah. I from my point of view, I recognise exactly what was going on in that there were, it's more to do with speech rhythms and the occasional word of dialect in the original text. And I tried to reflect that, but I'm lucky because I live in the north of England. So I thought, there's a real parallel between the north of the Netherlands and the north of England. Both have strong regional pride. Both areas have, nobody, I think, in the 21st century really speaks authentic dialect anymore. What they do is preserve elements of that in the rhythms of their speech and in some words. So in England, it would be, I think, ridiculous to imagine somebody speaking in the way that they did in the 19th century. But you do hear people locally here using local words in the north of England. And especially, I think, if it's to do with farming, people use the words that they're familiar with from the way that their parents and grandparents farmed. So I chose to translate words to do with the farm with Northern English words like byre and shippen. I did a lot of thinking about what words to choose for that. Really a lot of thinking, far more than it would appear in the book. I did a lot of checking of old dialect dictionaries, both in Gronings, and also Northern English dialect dictionaries. And I used my memory because I grew up in first in Lincolnshire and then in Cumbria. So you use your memory of what you remember when you were younger. My father had a Northern English accent. He spoke in a particular way. So family words come into it. And with dialogue, I do a lot of reading aloud of the text. Yeah. test it by reading it, and then I go and tell my husband the story. And I think, oh, there's a better word I could have used. And I also listen. I turn everything into a PDF and then turn on read loud and listen to the way that works. So then you hear in a mechanical voice what it sounds like. But I thought I would give you an example of, again, going back to the grandfather's Swear, because obviously the older generations are going to use more of that kind of language than the younger generations. And there's a scene, I think, that Saskia is going to read later, in which, in English, Swear says to his neighbour, "Milad, milad, milad, milad," clapping him on the back, full of compassion, really. In the original text, Saskia does use Groninger dialect. So he says, "Mignon, mignon." And I just thought the obvious thing to do was to choose to translate that as "milad, milad," which gives a warm feeling, a kind of family, compassionate feeling to it.
I think it worked wonderfully for a reader who only speaks English. I was convinced by the Northern English aspects of it, and at the same time I was able to kind of put myself there and then go one step further, to become in this region in the north of the Netherlands where I've never stepped foot, but I felt I could hear the language kind of the filter of the north of England, which was just marvelous. It's an absolute, I was stroke of genius. I think it worked brilliantly.
Thank you.
I think we lost Saskia for a minute there, but you're back.
I have this little bit unstable internet connection. I was already trying to get back on phone, but so I hope it won't happen again.
Okay, well we'll continue. I'm sure it will be okay.
A bit of the milad I heard, and then you were gone.
Oh. I was just saying how well I felt it worked, using the sort of north of England as a way of kind of channeling the readers into the Netherlands.
Absolutely.
I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, sure.
And I was also wanting to ask you, Saskia, about the idea of changing community, which is really important in the book, in all sorts of different ways. So you have a farming community who's having to change their farming practices and are quite resistant to that in some cases. But you've also got a community where relationships are changing, different kind of relationships are becoming commonplace or visible when they hadn't been before, where women's role in this society is changing. And I was very interested by the way a lot of the women are sort of starting to take the lead in terms of sort of stepping towards progress rather than resisting it. Could you talk a little bit about that, the change in these kind of very established farming communities?
Yeah, I think it's not very much different from rural areas in the north of England, and if you compare it to London, or maybe also Edinburgh and Glasgow, but here it is. Groningen has always been not in kilometers. I mean, the Netherlands is so small. I mean, if I go from center Amsterdam to north of Groningen to my little house, it's 200 kilometers. So that's not really a big issue. But in the idea of people, it is very far. And it are two completely different worlds. And the Groningen people always have been felt that the people who make the decisions also about them live very far away, and you cannot count on them. So that has always been the case, and it used to be like that because this area with all these farms on little mounds, do you say mounds?
Mounds.
Yeah.
Mounds?
Mounds.
Okay, little mounds. That were all. It's also separated from the city life and the way here in Amsterdam the cappuccinos and the cafe lattes are drinking, and we are talking about sustainability and climate change and whatever, and it's really two worlds that lots of people in the rural area of the Hailan feels really that they are attacked in their way of life by the way we Western people think about how life should be. Of course, not everyone. There are also very examples of circular farmers there who try to do the farm, run their farms in a very different way, in which it's much more not against nature, but with nature, as described in the book. But there is, it is the way we are here in the West are talking about Black Lives Matter, so the way that blackface, the shameful tradition which we have with Santa Claus, and we here in the West think since a long time that should be finished. And with Black Lives Matter, it's really started to be a lot of a fight against these blackface traditions. But in the North, people really feel it like they take away our tradition. So it's the threatening of the traditional life against the influence of the progressive Western city people. Mm-hmm. And so at the other hand, there is, of course, things are changing as well. I mean, the way it's more traditional also in the man-women relationships in one way. In the other way, the way farmers' wives have their own businesses and their work, the way they do their work, that's also often they are very strong women. Mm-hmm. And they do a lot of work and have a lot of responsibility. And not well, the women, I was especially looking for women and daughters working on their own, because I wanted to have an image of that, because that's another dynamic than with a normal family. Or and I met some very, very strong women who are used to work on their own for their whole lives, and there's no man who have to say anything to them. So it's not only one way or the other. Homosexuality, it's also a line in the book. Yeah, there is that's not so accepted in the way as it is in the in Holland, in the west of the Netherlands. On the other hand, I know a lot of homosexual people living there in the north and have a wonderful life, and everyone accepting them. I mean, so it's things are, of course, the changes go on there as well, but I think it's the tendency you see all through, at least in Europe, that there is a tension between city and rural area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very global phenomenon, I think. Yeah. That part of the book, I could relate to it so strongly from Scotland as well. I've lived in a lot of cities. I now live in the Highlands in a very rural community, and I could really relate to those aspects of the community. You know, good and bad. It's not a simple thing.
No.
I thought that was really interesting. Perhaps we could briefly talk about the title itself, and then we'll move on to your last reading, Saskia. The title is Shocked Earth in English. I was hoping you could both talk a little bit about where the title in the original Dutch and what the translation was like, and the many different ways of interpreting the words in both languages, which I think is wonderful.
Well, I when I thought about the title, I thought about that's not at the end of the book. I start to think about it right from the beginning. And I thought it would be nice if the farm is the central place of the book. I mean, the whole book is taking place in the farm or around the farm. So I thought it's such a central place in the story that it would be nice if I could find a name that is good as a title and is the name of the farm. And then, cheers. And then the Schokland original, it's the name of a very small island in the former Zuiderzee, and that's the inner sea in the middle of the Netherlands. And now there is a big dike, and it's not a sea anymore, but used to be a sea. And in the 19th century, there has been a big flood, and Schokland, the small island there, had been over-flooded for a large part, and it was drowned for such a big part that the government from at that time said, we are not going to rebuild it. It's a poor island anyway. We are not going to put any money in it. People have to leave. Which is interesting enough, some people say now about people in Groningen. There are not that many people living. Move them out and we can win all the gas. So that's also a similarity. And then one day I was driving, as I do a lot, from Amsterdam to Groningen and Groningen back, and my husband was beside me, and we passed Schokland, which is now a kind of museum place. And my husband said, Schokland. And then I said, yeah, because it means shocked earth. Yeah, shocked earth, shocked land. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's a wonderful story. But why would a farmer in Groningen call his farm Schokland? So I made a backstory about a little boy who had been living on Schokland while the flooding was going on. He lost his family. He went, as a lot of people do nowadays, going northwest to find a better life. That's also something from all the times, not only from this time. That has been going on always. And he has been rooted then in Groningen and has done a very good job, because after some time he could build his own farm. And then, of course, he thought back to his youth and called his farm Schokland. And that's, so I had the name of the farm and the book. Yeah.
And Antoinette, you found the title in English, going through several options, I think.
We did go through several options. So Sarah Hunt, the publisher behind Saraband, had approached me to ask me if I would like to translate this novel. She had a suggestion, probably from Saskia's publishers, that the novel should be called Breaking Ground. And she said to me, I don't like this because it's too similar to Van McDermid's book, Broken Ground. And in fact, I've just been looking up how many novels have the title Ground in the title, and there's really a lot: Unsettled Ground, Haunted Ground, Bitter Ground. You can carry on and carry on. And she said, could we think of something with shocked in the title? Mm-hmm. And as Saskia says, land in Schokland doesn't really mean earth normally. You would normally translate it as land, sometimes as country. And I did go through, should I call it Quake Country? And I'm really glad I didn't call it Quake Country. that also sounds very cliche to me now. And the obvious title was Shocked Earth. And Shocked Earth for me had this double meaning, not the double meaning exactly that Saskia is describing, but that the earth itself has been shocked by the way we have treated it. So it immediately makes it an environmental novel. It tells you this is an environmental novel that has implications well beyond the Netherlands. And that's why I thought it now seems like a really inevitable title. You won't imagine how many alternatives I went through. It seems very good to me now.
Yes, it's perfect. It ties in with the farm, with what's happened to the earth, as you say. It makes it global. Also, Shocked Earth, to me, it talks about the people as well, the shocks that the people are going through in the story.
Yeah.
I think we've got time. I would love to just quickly ask you, Saskia, about that interaction between the political and the personal. It's a very political book. It's a very environmental book. I feel so important for people to read for those reasons. But at the same time, it was the personal stories that really touched me of your characters, your amazing characters and their individual lives. Do you think that the personal and political always interact in your writing? Is it really important to have them both for you?
Well, it always happens because I always start with the individuals and with the stories of their lives. That's always where I start. And if you start digging in it, then of course politics are always interfering with individual lives. So yeah, you can close your eyes for it, but I don't do that. And that's maybe because of my Jewish background and how I've grown up by being knowing how politics and individual lives are interfering always. So I can't not see it. I always see that. And if you start, when I did the Vintage Queen about secondhand clothing, then if you go on researching that, then you find the consequences of this fashion madness. And here I found the consequences of the intensive agriculture and livestock farming. So, and the gas. So it is interfering, and we can deny it, but it's reality.
Yeah, and that's what makes it such a powerful book, I think, because it is. It's all encompassing. It's about issues that affect the whole world right now, and it's also so personal, and you feel such a close relationship to the people that you've created. I think it's an amazing achievement.
Thank you.
And to finish, I would love if you could read for us again briefly, if you are happy to.
Yeah, I would love to. I hope my internet connection is going to keep on.
I'll cross my fingers.
Yeah, I write here about Trein and Zwier notice that demolishing machines are driving to their neighbors 1 kilometer further on. Faco, he's called. He has a farm called White World. It's not a working farm, but he lives there. And they know it's going to be demolished because it has been too much earthquake schade. How do you?
Damage.
Huh?
Damage.
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 I suddenly lost the word.
Yes.
Okay. And they go there and they find this on the demolition apparatus is lined up by the side of the house like ranks of soldiers waiting for the signal to attack. The big steel-toothed maw is wide open. The centuries-old cloister bricks and the carefully painted barge boards, the dark green old board, the dark red floor tiles in the kitchen with their worn-out pathways along which year after year, generations of women shuffled back and forth, the old tiled chimney piece, the wooden floorboards that Focko had repaired and varnished, the green shutters he'd so carefully restored, the white window seats where he liked to sit on the cushion and gaze out of the window, and the stone front door steps where for more than 150 years brides were carried in and the dead were carried out, are all on the point of being destroyed. Focko's black Mercedes van is parked by the house, remnants of bright red lettering on its side that once formed the words, "The White World." Its doors are open, his household goods are bulging out, and scattered on the gravel around it are all the things that won't fit in. Zwier walks towards him, at the same time as the overall man, who is gesturing at Focko and shouting that he and his van and his trash have to leave, that they can't make a start on the job with him there. Focko whimpers when he sees them, points at the overstuffed van and the junk beside it, and then at his house. He bursts into sobs. Zwier claps him on the back. Me lad, me lad. Focko looks old and disheveled. The overall man approaches and asks if they are family. I'm the neighbor, Zwier answers. And who are you? The man says that they've got to get on with the job. They need space to do it, and this gent was supposed to have been gone already. Don't you have one little scrap of feeling in you? Zwier asks. While the guys from the other machines come closer, the heavy gang, a bunch of muscled thugs. It's not nice for the gent, the men say, and swallows, but agreements have been made. Mr. What's his name here has signed the contract. He's cashed his compensation, and now it's time for him to stick to his side of the bargain. He wasn't meant to be here today at all. And where is he supposed to go then? Well, that's not our problem, sir. We're the demolition man. Perhaps he could ask the council for help or Salvation Army. The man shrugs his shoulders while his mate wait there in silence, their arms folded. Zwier asks Trein to get Femke to bring their van along so they can load up the last boxes and refuse sex. And where are they supposed to go? Trein asks. We'll see about that later, he says, but he's got to leave. And then he yells out at the top of his voice, bloody fracking bloody hell. Sir, says the man in overalls, I can't do anything about this either. Let's try to be a little civilized about it. If we were a little civilized about it, then you lot wouldn't be here, Zwier says, and for the first time, Fokko raises his head and gives a little grin. Femke arrives and they load all Fokko's remaining household stuff into the van. He himself does nothing at all, just swigs from his bottle every now and then. Where's this stuff supposed to go then, Fokko? Trein asks again. He shakes his head, shrugging his shoulders. Come on, Zwier says. We'll take it all back home with us. You shouldn't drive, Treintje. You drive his van, I'll take him back with me. Zwier and his pickup are at the front, then Femke, then Trein. The overall man guides them out of the farmyard as if they are actually waiting for him to direct him. But the pickup stops at the edge of the farm lane, and their whole little column stops with it. Zwier and Fokko get out. He just wants a last look. As they lean against the back of Fokko's van, they see the roof being drilled right through and the shark's maw gobbling up pieces of roofing. The roof cracks, the beams break like bird bones. The insulation material turns to dust and plunges down. The engine roars and drones and thunders and rages and crackles and crunches. Destruction makes a hellish din. Fokko wails, Femke stares. Trein purses her lips. Zwier's cheeks go red. And high above this apocalyptic scene, where 150 years of history is being guzzled down, bite after bite after bite, a buzzard is circling, mewing, lamenting. Come on, Zwier says, this is too awful to watch. He wipes his tears away with the back of his hand and takes Fokko by the arm, who lets himself be led away like a rag doll. They get into the vehicles and drive back to Scotland in a small funeral procession.
Thank you very much. It's such a powerful passage, and it's such an incredible book, really. I think it's an extraordinary novel. I recommend it to absolutely every one of you watching, and everyone you know. Please share the word. It's been an absolute honor for me to talk to you both. Saskia Goldschmidt, Antoinette Fawcett, thank you both so much for joining me. Thank you for this extraordinary novel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for watching as well. Have a lovely